Hi everyone, so what's going on? Last time I looked online, more of the same essentially, more people being canceled, more people being outraged and offended about certain tweets, and we are observing the culture, the mass culture of wokeness on steroids, and the reason it's on steroids is because it's actually being powered by the very power elites that are wanting us to be divisive in our discourse instead of united against what is actually undermining us in society. So other than it being a mass distraction, it's actually become a tool. It's become a weaponized tool that is used to go against certain dissenting voices in society, and create sort of like a mob lynching effect for the one that is divergent from the mainstream narrative. And I don't want to talk about wokeness alone. However, I want to talk more about how narrow the discussion of colonization and colonialism and racism has been, especially in the last 2 years since the George Floyd event and BLM. Something I just never took the chance to record a video on. Well, first of all, I decided to go and look up woke and see what Google has to say about the definition. Woke means supposedly alert to injustice in society, especially racism. And then the example that they give in quotation marks, which is usually how do I use that word in a sentence, is the following: we need to stay angry and stay woke. So they're using a very inflammatory example. They're not using anything that is conducive to peacemaking or a larger awareness. It's actually like just basically fueling discord and violence, actually. And then on the right, it says woke is an English adjective meaning alert to racial justice, prejudice, and discrimination that originated in African American vernacular English. So it originated in African American vernacular English, yet it's being used the most by white people that are supposedly the ones that need to be lynched for their privilege. All right, where do I start with this? You know, I've been very sympathetic to the disenfranchised voices of the margin that are not part of mainstream society. And those voices are not only defined by the color of their skin, there's also an economic hierarchy that puts certain people at disadvantage that are not necessarily people of color. And I have actually personally studied the voices of post-colonial scholars. And what does post-colonial mean? Well, there were certain countries around the world that became liberated from their previous colonizers, and many brilliant intellectuals, public intellectuals and academics and other grassroots people led the struggle and led the liberation movements of these countries. And they're very well known, but I don't think they're well known enough in today's age of political correctness and sort of 9-second soundbite in mass media. Like, none of the people that actually laid the foundation for this discourse in a deep way are given any credit or mention. Everything is just reduced to like really petty squabbles about who was not included properly in the discussion, who was not named properly, and who offended whose nationality, ethnicity, race, etc., 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 gender included. So some of these scholars are actually like really inspiring. Edward Said, he's Palestinian, and he wrote on imperialism, and it's just basically a whole study on empire and how empire is perpetually set to expand. It's not something that stays static. It always tries to expand its dominion over land, people, raw resources, etc., etc., etc. People like Arundhati Roy have been like so vocal in India, you know, about colonization and decolonization of the mind and empowerment of the people. Vandana Shiva has broached the topic in a very broad way, like speaking of colonization of seed, which is the very source of life that farmers are basically barred from participating in and utilizing, and becoming subject to the machinations of big corporations. So who else on the spectrum? Frantz Fanon, you know, who wrote The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Mask, and his contribution being particularly in the realm of understanding the process of self-colonization, when the colonized develop an unhealthy admiration for their master and they try to start to emulate the master, and they quote-unquote become civilized and indoctrinated in the ideology of the colonizer. So essentially they're a black man or black woman that start to wear a white mask in society in order to climb the social ladder and be more accepted. Salman Rushdie, you know, he's raised so much awareness on the issues of Islamic fundamentalism and how that has a grip on these societies. So these are like some pioneers, some like real incredibly deep authors. Oh, or Bell Hooks as a black feminist. I mean, read her stuff and you're gonna get so much out of it. But all that education is actually lacking, and here comes BLM and like the George Floyd provocation or staging of an event. I'm not gonna go into the realms of did it happen, did it not happen, did he die from overdose or from asphyxiation. The point is the kind of exposure this was given to mobilize black people and others to essentially for political gains. And why did this happen? Why is this misinterpretation of racism, colonization, white privilege, wokeness on the rise in society? Why is it happening? I think it's because democracy as a system is actually losing legitimacy in the eyes of the populace or the electorates. And we're needing a little bit of pumped up rhetoric around, oh, we're still progressive, society is still going in the right direction, and here's the people you should vote for that embody that and exemplify that. And that is a complete farce, because representational democracy, the way we're experiencing it, is not any form of direct democracy. It is actually not defending the interests of the marginalized, disenfranchised. It's basically a show that is letting everyone know through mass media projection that there are certain values that are being upheld. And those values are the values of reparations to the ones that have been oppressed, but sort of in a moral way, not in an economic way. Like the reparations are not compensation in money. It's sort of like acknowledging that something bad happened to them. And also inclusivity. Inclusivity is seen as the one key indicator that we're living in a just society. If we have a black person in power, that means that society is going in the right direction. But if that black person is actually adopting, you know, the very policies of the elites and still perpetuating the systems in place, that is sort of subterranean to the mass consciousness right now. It's all about the front and the face and representation and inclusivity. So it's actually keeping us away from the deep discussions of who is in charge, who is still keeping people in this unjust economic paradigm and this paradigm of domination and surveillance, and who is actually advancing a more illicit, more nuanced, more surreptitious form of colonizing. What's at stake right now? It's sort of like, yeah, the earth is renewable, but it's also a finite resource, and we've colonized nature. There's been a war on nature from a very, very long time. And that is continuing. Now it's a war on our biology, on organic living, on organic natural immunity of human beings. And nobody's looking at that type of colonization. It's sort of how the territory, it's advancing and advancing, and because it's been saturated, it cannot grab any more land, it cannot grab any more oil, it can't take over anything other than our hearts, minds, biology, our privacy, our data. So like these are the realms of colonization today that are very much untouched and advancing. And yet, here's a distraction over here about racism. Hello, it's just about racism and setting the record straight. No, it's not. The agenda is continuing unimpeded, and it is co-opting the public consciousness to fight in a very small area, using very small examples of injustice compared to the larger injustices that are continuing in society today. So this is essentially the definition of empire. It's something that needs to perpetually grow, and then it starts to cannibalize its own citizens. It starts to expand out into the realm of the unseen, like the metaverse, buying real estate in the virtual space because there's no more real estate to be bought and sold in real life. Or we're gonna run out one day, right? So this is something that's not being discussed, and so these woke warfare types of engagements that are happening online are so poisonous, and they take up space in our mental sanctum, in our spirituality, within a realm where we can be asking deeper questions and becoming more cooperative in understanding what is actually putting us at disadvantage. Is it a white man in a suit? Or is it an entire coordinated cabal that actually has representations in other countries? I mean, some of the billionaires are Indian, and and let's speak of my otherness, right? I show up as a white woman, but am I white? I've identified on certain surveys as Caucasian or other, not knowing how to identify, but I don't represent the white privilege or whatever's being talked about. There's no privilege in my background coming from Eastern Europe and having had colonizers that were actually not white. The Byzantine Empire were ethnic Greeks. The Ottoman Empire were Turks. The Romans were not really white. And all right, the Russians are pretty Caucasian, but they're also pretty diverse, the Russian Empire. So it is not as black and white and as the mainstream culture and media is making it out to be. And it's not allowing any nuanced perspective on the issue. And yeah, I just wanted to make this video and basically encourage you to read and get exposed to some of these authors, like I mentioned, like Edward Said, Arundhati Roy, Vandana Shiva, Bell Hooks, Frantz Fanon. Like, these are very, very important authors in the subjects that we're discussing. And to understand the trajectory of colonialism and how much it's still alive as neo-colonialism in this day and age. And yet we are encouraged to fuel the fire of divisiveness in some areas that are much more narrow and actually not disclosing the real shadow puppeteers. They villainize certain people for being politically incorrect or speaking their mind in order to shift accountability away from the real culprits. And this is the big elephant in the room. So please let me know your thoughts on this and how you are receiving all of this rhetoric and where do you stand on the issue. Thank you.